In the yellow pullover, up at the very back row, please. The man in the yellow, yes.
As I recall, a senior member of the shadow cabinet under Ted Heath was called Enoch Powell, and his views were almost identical to those of Mr. Griffin. And that gentleman actually shooed Ted Heath into number 10 with those views.
Mm-hmm. OK. Chris Huhne?
Well, let me answer that directly, because I think it's interesting. What we're dealing with here with Nick Griffin and the BNP is a politics which actually is as old as the hills. It's a politics of finding people to blame, to scapegoat. And that's exactly what Enoch Powell did in the Rivers of Blood speech. And I don't think he would recognise this country today. If you think that 1 in 2 of all Afro-Caribbean children under the age of 16 either have a white mother or a white father, that's how far this country has changed since Enoch Powell made that speech. We had this in the 1930s against the Jews, the 1960s against the blacks, and now Nick Griffin's playing the same old game, hatred and fear, peddling hatred and fear against a minority that actually has to defend itself. And I think that's outrageous. It's completely against the traditions of this country. And I think Churchill would frankly be rolling in his grave. There are 3 parties represented on this panel that can say something about Churchill's legacy. He was a liberal for many years, he was a conservative for many years, and of course he led a government that was composed of Labour ministers. But one thing he was never was actually a fascist. And what we have from Nick Griffin, and I would like his view, see whether he has been misquoted on this, because this was video footage. There's no question of him being misquoted. This is his technique. Perhaps one day, because he's going to try and be very moderate today, perhaps one day, once by being rather more subtle, we've got ourselves in a position where we control the British broadcasting media, then perhaps one day the British people might change their mind and say, yes, every last one must go, every single member of an ethnic minority. And this is the man who actually said, when we're thinking of Churchill and fighting fascism, yes, Adolf went a bit too far. Now, which bit too far, Nick Griffin, did Adolf Hitler go? Was it in gassing the Jews? Was it in bombing British cities, where he's now trying to get votes?
Chris, that's another one of those lies.
Wait, sorry, which lie?
I'm talking about the one Adolf went a bit too far. I never said such a thing. I am the most loathed man in Britain in the eyes of Britain's Nazis. There are Nazis in Britain, and they loathe me because I have brought the British National Party from being, frankly, an anti-Semitic and racist organisation into being the only political party which, in the clashes between Israel and Gaza, stood full square behind Israel's right to deal with Hamas terrorists.
Well, answer this point about the video. Because there's no question of you being misquoted on that. It's on video. And you are saying...
Wait a minute. There's another point about this video, which I've also seen. Anybody can see it. It's on YouTube. And you were there with the American friends of the BNP, and you were with the head of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke. He's there in the picture, standing beside you. And the interesting thing to me is... He's there. I've seen it. You can see it.
Let me explain it.
Well, OK, all right. He's in disguise, perhaps. Anyway, but this is the key point, and it goes to the heart of this programme tonight and of everything you've been saying and of what Chris Huhne has been saying about you changing the views of the BNP. What you actually said, as he quoted, is perhaps one day the British people might change their minds. And you went on, but if you put that, i.e. getting rid of all coloured people from Britain, as your sole aim to start with, you're going to get absolutely nowhere. So instead of talking about racial purity, we talk about identity. We use saleable words: freedom, security, identity, democracy. Nobody can come and attack you on those ideas. But the truth is, what you were saying there was, that's just the start of the story. And when we've won public support, then we can go to our proper agenda.
Absolutely.
I shared a platform with David Duke, who was once a leader of a Ku Klux Klan, always a totally non-violent one, incidentally.
Nick, excuse me. Don't go and talk about the Ku Klux Klan.
It's a vile organisation.
No. I can tell you about David Duke. We don't have time for that. Don't be... Yes.
Yep. But further to David Duke. He detests where I stand. He regards me as a sellout. I've shared a platform arguing with him And when you're trying to win people over to a more moderate position, you have to go somewhere to start with where they come from. That, for instance, was the process whereby the Labour Party and others ended up today with Sinn Féin in government.
So you were saying these things not because you meant them, but because it was the way of winning him over? In other words, you wanted to win over a racist to your view, and you said we start by being moderate.
Not to win over him, I'm trying to win over the youngsters he otherwise leads astray. But can we reframe this whole question?
The point about this is, why should anybody trust what you say? Why should anybody think it's any more than a facade?
Why should anybody trust any politician? All of us. As simple as that, really.
It's not as simple.
Sorry, I apologise. Sorry, I apologise.
Could I just come in here? Because we've seen over the last week, and we've seen it in front of our eyes this evening, that the moment that anybody puts an uncomfortable quotation to Mr. Griffin, he says, I didn't say that, it wasn't quite like that. Well, most of us actually seen these things on YouTube. I saw Mr. Griffin saying this on YouTube. Yes. Out of it, he did say it. Oh, good.
I did say
out of his own mouth. But time and again, he wants to wriggle out of it. They've even published a manual. It's called the BNP Language and Concepts Discipline Manual, which starts off, rule 1, the BNP is not a racist or racial party. Well, no other party has to say they're not a racist or racial party. Okay. Secondly, just 1 second,
all right,
don't hesitate to repudiate bad aspects of the BNP's past. And this, I tell you what this reminds me of. Reminds me of Dr. Strangelove. This guy is the Dr. Strangelove of British politics.
Okay, I want to go to some members of the audience. The person, the woman in the second row at the back there, please. Yes.
Hello, I'd like to hear from Mr. Griffin a little more detail on his policies of repatriation.
We'll come to that, all right? I promise you it'll be our next topic. The person there on the left with the brown pullover on. Yes?
Brown? It's green.
Green, all right.
I wonder what Mr. Griffin's venomous tongue wants to say about, because he says he's brought the British National Party away from racism, but why has it taken many years of legal action and the Equality Commission to force you to change your entrance policy from only white members?
Okay. And the woman here on the right.
I'm interested to know how you define an ethnic minority when the human race is largely believed to have started in Africa. So essentially, all of us are an ethnic minority.
Okay. The person in the blue shirt up there at the back. I'm just taking some comments here. The person in the blue shirt with spectacles on. Yes. You, sir.
That's right. So Winston Churchill...
All right, he's got a white shirt. That doesn't matter. Go on then, Farron.
So Winston Churchill put everything on the line so that my ancestors wouldn't get, slaughtered in the concentration camps. But here sits a man who says that that's a myth, just like a flat world was a myth. How could you say that? How could you?
Can I answer those 3 points very briefly? Firstly, to that one, I cannot explain why I used to say those things. I can't tell you... any more than I can tell you why I've changed my mind. I can't tell you the extent to which I've changed my mind, because European law...
This is rubbish.
Because European law prevents me from doing so.
There is no law here that stops you explaining yourself.
And we refused a European arrest warrant on precisely this from a country that does require Holocaust denial to be an offence, and we refused that.
And as a Justice Minister, I promise you, if you want to explain why you don't believe it... Go ahead. Go on.
You got it. You have the freedom now to explain it.
But unfortunately, the French courts and the German courts would not recognise me.
I'll sort that out for you as well.
The Justice Minister.
Hold on.
Come on.
I have a question. Have you actually changed your mind, or do you only say you've changed your mind because the law makes it illegal to be a Holocaust denier?
I have changed my mind. A lot of it's about figures, and one of the key things. Yes. And one of the key things which makes me change my mind is British radio intercepts of German transmissions about the brutal mass murder of innocent Jews on the Eastern Front during anti-partisan warfare, which changes the figures very greatly.
What about the Holocaust? Did that require some intercepts?
Can I get back to one of the other
points now?
What
about Auschwitz? Couldn't people see with their own eyes what happened in Auschwitz? You didn't need a subsequent radio intercept to find out that people were gassed at Auschwitz.
Absolutely. Right. We're going to move on. I'm going to move on. We've spent a lot of 20 minutes on that first question. There are many, many other questions and many issues to be raised, many of them centred inevitably on the BNP.